Surprise solo by LXTAO_MT. Summary. Laney hates her birthday. Corey can't understand that. And Laney hates that. Okay, you guys promise not to freak out? Laney said worriedly. Corey and the twins, Kin and Con, nodded eagerly in their seat in anticipation. Laney took a deep breath and looked at them. Today's my birthday. Immediately, all the three boys gasped and asked questions. Laney, that's amazing. Corey, what if I make you an explosive birthday cake? Kin, what if it shot fireworks? Con, no! Laney shouted suddenly. No, no, no! Everything around her hushed as she tried her best to try and recover from the sudden outrage. Whoa, Lanes, Corey asked, concerned. What's wrong? As Laney's boyfriend and best friend, Corey prone to worrying about Laney. To any of his friends, actually. He's just a very sympathetic person. Unless it's to Trina. He's never gonna care about her. Yeah, Kin agreed. You seem kinda off. Yeah, it's fine. Laney reassured them. It's nothing, just kinda peeved. She took another heavy sigh. Do you need to go outside? Corey questioned. Do you want to talk? I'm always here. Corey looked extremely anxious. He didn't want the person he loved most in a bad state. Yeah, Laney silently responded. Yeah, I need some time alone. She swiftly walked out, not taking her bass with her. No one knew where she was heading, but in a few minutes they heard the heavy door slam. What was that about? Con scratched his head. Kin responded with a shrug. Both of them looked at Corey, who stood there, still trying to process what just happened. Oh, Cor? Keen asked. You good? Corey didn't respond, as he sat back on the sofa in the garage and stayed quiet. He was thinking very, very deeply. Maybe that wasn't good enough for her, Corey said after what seemed like an eternity of silence. Kin and Con raised their eyebrows. What does that mean? Con exclaimed. Kin lit up, understanding what Corey meant. It means maybe Laney wants something really good, Kin explained confidently. Something better than the exploding cake. That shot fireworks? Con responded confused. How can you get any better than that? I don't know. Maybe I should add a personality in there just for Laney. Kin shrugged once again. Huh, guys, Corey interrupted. As Laney's best friends, we should invent the craziest and most amazing thing for her that she'll instantly love. Yeah, Kin stated. But what does she love? Well, what's she good at? Corey answered. He pointed at the bass she had left alone when she stormed out. The twins nodded. But isn't that vandalism? Kin said, picking it up in its case. He placed it on the makeshift table near the sofa. Oh, it isn't vandalism if it's for a good cause, Corey exclaimed as all the boys gathered around it. There was a silence as they all stared at it. So what should we add? Lasers. Engine pipes. Tigers? Green. New ideas continued to pop into existence as if they were all carefully planned. All the boys excitedly rushed to grab new items and templates that ran through their mind. Okay, Cor, this better be good. Laney had cheered up just a bit from last time she stormed out. Corey had forced her to wear a bandana on her eyes and carefully lead her to his garage, where Kin and Con hold the bass as if it were a prized possession. As Laney entered the iconic garage, Kin and Con tried hard to contain themselves as Laney walked closer. The closer she got, the thrilling the moment got. Each one of them were eager to see Laney's reaction to the coolest bass ever. It had it all. It had silver engine pipes, flames, thunderbolts, tigers. Everything good in life was plastered on that one bass guitar. As Corey stopped Laney, he quickly rushed next to Kin on the left. Okay, you can take it off now, Corey merrily announced. Laney started to undo the knots on the back. It slowly fell to the ground as Laney opened her eyes. A bit of her eyeliner smudged as she looked at the gift. Surprise! They all shouted at the same time. They all waited for the outburst, the happy reaction to their newest gift. The squeal of delight, the shout of joy. But it never came. They saw her face soon droop, her eyebrows furrowed. She stiffened. It never came, because she didn't like it. All of the boys realized this at the same time, and a death-filled silence spread among them. No one was celebrating. Everyone knew what came next. What? Laney began, a crack in her voice. What did you do? Her voice got louder with each word. Well, we just did some experimenting on your base. Kin tried to soothe her. His attempts did not work. She reached out to her base, holding its body in her hands. We thought you would like it. Well, maybe I didn't want it experimented with. Laney muttered. Her breaths became more heavy. Maybe I didn't want this to happen. She snapped her head at Kin. Her face was serious. She glared at him with shame as her eyes glistened, and she bit her lip to stop her from sobbing. Maybe Kin, she erupted. Maybe you should mind your own business and stop meddling in my stuff. Maybe that. Kin backed away, as if getting ready for a punch or kick. Con interrupted. Oh, Laney, aren't you happy that we surprised you on your birthday? Con reasoned with her. She looked at him with hatred in her eyes. A disapproving look in her eye. Wow, Con, you really weren't listening earlier? She laughed, but it broke in the middle, revealing a broken sob. Well, I'm not shocked. The way you play drums is sure to deafen you due to the fact you play like a drunk bitch. Corey flinched when he heard Laney swear at Con. Con seemed to notice too. Hey, at least I don't act all mysterious around the people who I'm closest with. Con snapped back with a tone of fury. Laney stared back at him with the same fury but different devastation. Well, why do you want to know about my personal life so much? Laney roared back. The tears were already starting to fall from her eyes. Laney, Con, come on. Laney whipped her head around to look at Corey, and her eyes tensed with rage. Her makeup smudged from her outburst, and she turned to Corey furiously. And you, she said in a grave voice. Corey tried to stand his ground, to stay brave, to be the dominant leader of his band. But he couldn't deny he was feeling petrified. He focused on her, trying to replicate her penetrating stare. It was such a drastic change by looking at someone who he loved dearly with the stare only hell could copy. After every adventure, Laney started, her voice filled with nothing. Not anger or sadness, just pure nothing. After every failure, every crash, every break, every dollar, I have stayed here. But I get rewarded like this? That bit sliced Corey to his core. He felt his heart ache and his stare faltered. He swallowed a lump in his throat. Laney, he sighed. We thought we were helping you. She chuckled a little bit. You can't help me anymore, she said. Nothing. Just nothing. Corey didn't know this girl who he looked at. A stranger he once knew. You're a bad friend. A bad leader. She paused before turning to the exit. And definitely a bad boyfriend. She stayed still for a moment. Everything stayed still for a moment. Kin and Con stood there frozen. Corey stood there frozen. Laney refused to look at any of them. She raised the base over her head while looking at the exit, and threw it on the floor. Everything broke off immediately. The tigers, the bolts, the body, the time that was taken to make that. It all broke. Every single bit. Laney threw off the pieces that were still intact and slid her feet over to the exit. She opened it bit by bit before leaving the boys to look at the pile of steel that once used to resemble a bass. That once was a memory of what could have made a better one. That once was a memory of joy and dreams. That once was a memory of Laney. The darkness in Corey's room never felt so lonely. He felt isolated knowing that it was his fault. His fault? He isn't even dressed. After that, Kin and Con had to leave Corey as he stood there, miserably looking at the rubble of parts. He sat on the edge of his bed looking at the carpeted floor. His mind kept replaying every flaw he had, how he failed, how it's his fault, how Laney's right. Laney, his best friend, partner in crime, his companion. It's all his fault he lost her. His heartbeat was beating rapidly, and his breathing became uneven. A strange feeling spread throughout his chest. And then something wet fell on his sleeve. It came from his face. He placed a hand near his eye to realize that he was crying thick, clear tears that he could see through the darkness. He laughed. Ha! He smiled through sadness. He looked at his shaking hand that had a salty tear running down further to his wrist. "I'm crying." Then it came crashing down. 13 years of pain, anger, envy, disappointment came falling on him like tons and tons of bricks that relentlessly broke at his back. He choked out a sob, and soon he couldn't control his breathing. He felt the tears peeking under his hands and fingers. He felt the spit dribble down. He felt disgusted by himself. But he couldn't care anymore. Nothing is worth it when it's your fault. He felt as if he had been stripped of all he ever loved. He felt it everywhere. He felt his stomach twist and pull, while his mouth distorted itself to release anything he had been repressing from all those years of withholding sadness. He felt his head pound and stab. He felt the guilt eating him alive. But it's his fault, all his fault. Corey woke up feeling the painful headache that infested his head. Everything last night was one bad nightmare that somehow became reality. He groaned as he got up from his bed. He must have not gotten changed anyway, since he was still in the clothes he wore a few hours ago. He shivered at the quiet room. It was suffocating how silent it was. But Corey wasn't in the mood to make any music of any kind. He didn't feel like doing anything anymore. He didn't know anything. Has the band broken up? Or will they resolve this? Will they resolve this at all? In the end, Corey knew it was his idea to surprise Laney. He knew it was his fault that she had a sudden outburst. If he never did that, everything would be okay. But right now, everything wasn't. But he knew he had the guts to make it better. So why isn't he? He realized his question, and his mind started to spin as he thought of one idea that he really, really hoped would work. So, after heavy pondering and cleaning himself up, he found himself stood in front of Laney's house. He tried his best not to cower at the sight that once made his heart fill with happiness. He rose his hand to the door. He knocked 3 times and retreated his hand back to his side. And he waited. He heard the long creak of the door to be met with a tall woman he knew all too well. "Corey," said Mrs. Penn. Corey tried his best to give his best "I'm fine and everything's fine" smile. She seemed to believe it as she ushered him to come in. "How's your dad?" "Good," Corey stated vaguely. He was speechless. Mrs. Penn continued to chat and talk as she walked into the kitchen while Corey stood alone by the front door. Also, Mrs. Penn began. She furrowed her brow as if she was perplexed. "Did something happen yesterday? Laney hasn't come down in ages." Corey swallowed. He forced a laugh. "I don't know. Maybe she's in a bad mood. I can talk to her if you want." Mrs. Penn smiled at him. "Oh, thank you, Corey." She grinned blissfully. "You are a lovely kid." He nodded with an awkward smile on his face before bolting up the stairs of the home. He felt his foot meet the carpeted floor of the 2nd floor. He looked around through the darkness. He saw the farthest room and slowly walked to it, trying his best not to disturb anyone. So, he looked at the door to Laney's room. It seemed like a doomsday entry instead of the door of his best friend of 13 years. He sighed deep, reassuring himself Laney and him have had many fights, and they were going to get over this. Right? All the feelings of relentless doubt rushed back in him, a sharp pain in his eyes. He didn't want to lose Laney. He didn't. So he took another sigh. This is the best thing you can do, he thought to himself. He knocked on the wooden door. The noise echoed in his ears. The reaction was instant with a quick, "Go away, Mom." But it was whispered and quiet, as if her voice would shatter like glass. Corey coughed. "Lanes, it's Corey." He spoke. He heard movement from the other side. "Are you all right?" Though hearing movement from the other, Corey didn't hear a response. He knew Laney was listening, but she was ignoring him. Laney," he said miserably. He pinched the bridge of his nose in regret. "I'm so sorry about yesterday. I'm sorry about my stupidity. He stopped. "I've just been thinking about how you deserve so much better, and how I should have listened. And it's okay if you're mad at me." It wasn't. He really didn't want Laney to be mad at him, but it was inevitable. "I just want you to know I'm stupid, and I should have been a better boyfriend. And it's fine if you want to break up with me." He gulped back a sob that instead came out as a wet cough. He couldn't hear anything on the other side as he leaned his forehead against the door. And so, then he heard faint giggling, but it wasn't sad giggling. More like the laugh you make when someone said something so stupid, it's funny. Corey, he heard from the other side. Her voice sounded like it was breaking. She sniffled. That was probably the dumbest thing I have ever heard you say. Corey wanted to comfort her, to tell her he was sorry, and he wanted to help. He wanted to tell her she deserved better. He wanted to tell her to stop crying, because he's here now, and everything is going to be okay. In the end, Laney spoke again. Corey pressed the side of his head against the door. This is my fault. I was overreacting and was put in the worst mood and… No! Corey Whisper shouted to hide his obvious cracking voice. No, it isn't your fault. It's mine, Lanes. Your reaction was needed. It really punched some sense into me. It's my fault. Laney laughed again, but it was more of a genuine laugh. Seriously, Corey, she said, dying down from laughing. It's not your fault. It's mine. And I know you're going to argue with me about that, but I really don't want to argue with you. After Laney said that, a comfortable silence fell. It was such a different feeling from when Corey first came. He finally felt as if he was home, with his best friend. Do you? Laney questioned at him quietly. No. Then both of them began to laugh. It was strange is what Corey thought. He didn't know what was so funny, but whatever he was laughing at was hilarious. Corey liked hearing Laney laugh. He was happy when Laney was, and that's what made it better. There was no longer this war between them. It was all in the past. No matter how many times they argue, they will continue to have moments like these, where Corey savors Laney's laugh, or kindness, or patience, where he just wants to hug her and tell her she's amazing, because he's not lying. She's the best person Corey could run to when he's sad. She's the best. And in this moment, he wants to stay. They laughed for almost 10 minutes before simmering down. Corey enjoyed that he could still be on good terms with Laney. He enjoyed that he could be with Laney. Hey, Lanes, he said as he sat on the floor, leaning the back of his head on the back of the door. She hummed a response. Why do you hate your birthday? She took a while to answer. I don't want to get older, she said. I don't want to think that one day I might be at more of a risk at losing people. I don't want to lose anyone. I don't really want people reminding me that one day I'll be away from everyone, and especially away from you. Too. Corey looked at the wooden door, as if she was right behind him. Really? You think I would leave? Laney exhaled quickly. Yeah, eventually. It was Corey's turn to laugh as he let out a quick snicker. He threw his back on the door. Lanes, he addressed her. I would never leave you. Even if you were like a worm. Then it was Laney who burst out laughing. They both howled with laughter at Corey's dumb comment. Though the door was splitting them, Corey could tell Laney had a giant smile of her face. And that was good. Even better. It was almost perfect.